It's love. Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Anurag Rana.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Bloomberg's The Future Investor Navigating a Complex Data World event. It's a very complicated data world, so we gotta make sure we know what we were doing. So whether you're with us in person or in Chicago or joining us virtually from elsewhere, we're thrilled to have you with us. While data, AI, and advanced analytics are not new tools in the world of investing, in fact, they've been employed by hedge funds for decades. Newly released generative AI platforms have ushered in an era in which individuals are able to independently access AI-driven insights for their own investment strategies. I was just telling somebody right now, I think over the last 1 year, a little more than that, we've seen probably more than $1 trillion worth of market cap addition to this just because of Gen AI, and now we'll have to see how that actually translates. So, and more effectively, they can extract and understand these insights, the more of an investment edge they have. But questions remains, how reliable is the information, whether it needs to be combined with human judgment, analysis, expertise to be both accurate and useful. Well, I hope that's better true, otherwise I'll lose my job very quickly. Today we'll explore the paradigm shift in both individual and institutional investment strategies brought about by AI, learn about some of the hidden pitfalls, and promise to watch out for as we come in inevitably to rely more and more on it. So before we get started, a couple of announcements. First, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsor, Invesco QQQ, who we are excited to hear from later in the program. Right, that's good. You can ask questions of our panel by scanning the QR code on the screen, and we'll try to get what we can live on the stage. We also want you to engage us on social media. To do so, you can use the hashtag #TheFutureInvestor, where you can also follow along with the day's highlights. We'll also be sharing highlights and engagement using the handle @Bloomberg Live. Feel free to tag us also. Now that's out of the way, let's dive right in. Our first guest today is a man who has a vast experience in developing and applying predictive analytics to change and improve outcomes. Please welcome on the stage Eric Huls from Allstate. Welcome, Eric. It's been a lot of fun. I actually remember covering insurance back in 2003, and it was a very different world at that point. Yep. So why don't we start off a little bit with your introduction, what you do, your role at Allstate, your background, and what you're currently responsible for.
Sure. So I'm Allstate's Chief Data Officer, and I lead a team of folks really specializing in data governance, making sure we have data available when, where, and how we need it to make better business decisions and better serve our customers, as well as a pretty large data science group, somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 or so data scientists as well. Not necessarily doing all of the data science work throughout the enterprise, but really that core data science hub within Allstate as well.
That's actually very interesting. 200 people?
Yep. Perhaps
in just a framework, what do these 200 people do on a day-to-day basis? Like, is a lot of their time to do data cleanup? Like, give me some kind of a structure around this team. I'm pretty amazed at that.
Yeah, so we've got a number of different roles within the team, right? So some are focused very much on data governance. Some are focused on data engineering. We've got folks, like I said, focused on data science. And then our scope is pretty broad. So if you think of problems that a company like Allstate would face, we've got, kind of our fingers in all of those pies in one way or another. So everything from helping make sure our marketing is efficient and effective, working with the sales department to make sure we're having good, effective interactions with consumers in the sales space. Operations, claims is a big area of focus for us. So it kind of runs the gamut of the insurance value chain.
So say at the highest level, when you make your business plan, what are some of the top things that you want to achieve with AI, let's say over the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, so I think, when we think about AI, it's always in the context of Allstate's broader strategy, right? And what Allstate does and what we aspire to do is provide consumers with simple, affordable, connected protection, do that in a way that sort of recognizes them as individuals, understands their situation, and it best serve them when, where, and how they want to be served. So that AI strategy is really anchored on that business strategy more broadly, and then we really think of AI as just a new set of tools to deliver on that value proposition in a way that's hopefully more effective than it has been in the past.
So one of the areas that I have heard is customer service. Just people are absolutely dying to use it in that framework. I'm sure given claims and all the stuff that goes for insurance, give us a little bit of background of what's happening at Allstate with customer service across the entire gamut.
Yeah, I think there's maybe 2 categories of that. So I think first off, it's making interactions hopefully simpler, faster, and then more cost efficient in a way that allows us to provide that savings back to consumers. So I've certainly, and I'm sure everyone in the room has had a situation where they just want what seems to be a straightforward bit of information or a fact about whatever service or product they're purchasing, and you end up on a website and seems like you're searching forever. And I do search forever because talking to a human is like the last thing I want to do. Or if you call in, right, and you wait on hold, or you get transferred, and each time you get transferred, you've got to kind of start over. I think with the power of AI, hopefully that eliminates a lot of that, right? So those are things like chatbots if you're in digital channels, or if you're getting transferred either across channels or through human channels, things like summarization and some of the new Gen AI tools, right, where the next interaction point can kind of pick right up for where the last one ended.
I personally have seen a massive improvement in the chatbot experience over the last few years. I don't think it's because of Gen AI. I think it's just natural progression of that.
Yep.
Do you have any stats or in terms of when did you start using that? How has it evolved? I was reading somewhere around 30 to 50% of the inquiries can just be answered initially through that, the easy stuff.
Yep.
How's your experience been with that?
Yeah, certainly we're still on that journey, I think, but I think that number doesn't sound crazy to me, right? And I kind of think of, even with traditional sort of NLP techniques, right, you kind of had to teach the machine English before you taught it your subject matter that you needed it to know. When we start getting into large language models, they kind of come built in with that understanding of language. And so certainly it's much faster to train models. You can get sort of more things contemplated into that machinery much more quickly. And so that power we're just starting to harness, but we think that's going to be huge in terms of efficiency.
So what real-world applications are you seeing actually at Allstate right now with some of these AI, NLP, Gen AI technologies, and have you seen any changes in productivity through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's tools, even people in roles like mine that get more efficient, right? I think all of a sudden, it felt like half of my day was responding to emails. Like, you can kind of push a button now and have that email created on your behalf, and you just kind of proofread it and send it. So I think even in what we've traditionally thought of as sort of white-collar jobs, I think you're seeing a lot of automation opportunities, and you're starting to see that hit the market already. I think, I mentioned summarization as a big sort of new capability. A lot of people that we have in say, call center jobs, for example, they'll spend 5 minutes on the phone, and then they'll spend 10 minutes documenting what they talked about on the phone, right? And I think when you start to look at sort of the amount of time people are kind of interfacing with customers and quote unquote doing their job versus kind of documenting their job, that's going to be huge efficiency gains.
So part of my role at Bloomberg is to cover some of these larger companies, technology companies. And one of the big questions I get asked a lot is, what's the impact of that on hiring and things like that? Have you seen any changes in your behavior and your means, the department's behavior of hiring new people or how does it impact, human beings in terms of that?
Yeah. Well, I think it certainly changes the skill set you need to where, humans have comparative advantage, right? So I think in a lot of those customer-facing jobs, right, whereas today it can seem transactional. It's going to free up our representatives to actually focus on the customer and the conversation, right, as opposed to translating what they're hearing into the form they need to fill out or the things that they need to document. And so I think you'll see shifts, particularly in the customer-facing jobs, towards skills like empathy and relationship building, and that's a little bit different maybe than how some of those roles have been filled in the past.
I used to feel I'm kind of handicapped in the tech world because I don't know coding. Now I'm happy that, if I understand the business concepts, I won't need to know coding.
Yep.
Is that an area where you're seeing some kind of improvement in hiring trends? Because it's, first of all, it's very difficult to find technology people. But have you seen any changes in your application development and kind of the backbone of your tech infrastructure?
Yep. Yeah, I empathize with that. I don't know how to code either. Yeah, it's kind of like what I said with sort of being able to generate that first draft of an email. We're kind of seeing that in the coding space, right? So I don't know that we're to the point there where it's you sort of simply tell a large language model to write all of the code, but certainly if it can get you 50% of the way there or 60% of the way there, that's a lot of efficiency gain too. And I think we're quickly getting up to those levels.
Yeah, I'm going to go back several years ago, and I found this very interesting. When IBM was pitching Watson long time ago, they did a deal with Geico, or they wanted to figure out how they can get better loss ratios and everything. And to be honest, it didn't go anywhere at that time. I think that deal or that partnership fell apart. Do you use a lot of AI or that kind of technology to do loss ratios, analysis, and where do you think we are in that curve? And do you think companies will, or insurance companies will get a competitive edge because of that?
Yeah, I mean, in general, insurance companies, P&C insurance companies really compete, I think, at the end of the day on underwriting and claims practices, right? And clearly the customer experience on top of that is a huge part of that. But cost is such a big driver in consumer preference that if you're not good at those other things, right, you're still going to lose in the market. So I think companies are competing on AI in this space. I think there's I don't know if it's challenge is the right word, but there's some uniqueness just because of the regulated nature of the industry that I think as we get further and further into using AI that companies have to be cognizant of and aware of just from a risk management standpoint. But yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a sort of a core capability of insurers now and in the days to come.
Do you think it favors larger companies with a lot of data compared to, let's say, a startup with, maybe some technology, but not a whole lot of data? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think, at the end of the day, and this may not be 100%, it might be a little bit of an oversimplification, but at the end of the day, the hardware is going to be commodity, right? The algorithms are going to be commodity. The same sort of technologies that Allstate buys are what everyone else can buy. It's really the data that you can run through the algorithms that is really going to bring those things to life. And I think that's just a really hard barrier to entry, even for the more sophisticated kind of tech startup insurance companies. I think we've seen that in the market.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I was having a call with an investor just on that topic itself. The other thing that I've seen, at least right now, is enterprises or companies are less, willing to run their internal data with, open source public models at this point. Where are you in that, framework in your mind? How do you protect your own data so that the model doesn't train and goes out and benefit somebody else?
Go crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got a whole strategy around that. I think even with some of the open source types of tools, you can kind of import those into the organization and build walls around those. And so I think as we're looking at commercial solutions, certainly we evaluate that against maybe a homegrown sort of version of an open source tool, or even a vended sort of solution that puts a wrapper around those types of things.
Yeah, I see. Any Allstate specific applications that you are thinking about that you can publicly share?
Yeah, I'll give you maybe three, and we talked about claim settlement and underwriting. So obviously, as a customer, when you're in a claim, even if that's a relatively minor accident, right, that can be a stressful moment. And so when you call your insurance company, you don't want that to feel like a transactional interaction. You don't want it to feel like you're filling out a form, right? So one of the things we've developed fairly recently is something we call Tell My Story. And instead of kind of having it's called a checklist that the rep is looking to complete, we actually just let the customer tell us what happened, right, in their own words. And then we're using sort of NLP to then extract from their story those facts. And again, as I mentioned earlier, because we're doing that, then that representative is focused on, being empathetic, helping the customer through that moment more than just kind of note-taking. Another example, and this is kind of in various stages of development, one of the first decisions we have to make as a company after that accident is reported is we have to decide whether we're going to fix that car or whether we're going to total that car, right? And that's a big decision that we have to make, because if we route it in the wrong direction, it's going to take longer to get that customer back on their way. It's also going to cost more, right? And that ultimately that additional cost gets passed back to consumers. So we've had models in this space to help us make those decisions in the past. More recently, we're starting to test out machine vision models, right, where we're adding images of the vehicles to our more traditional structured data, and we're seeing power in that. And then maybe one last example, in the homeowners insurance space, when a customer comes to us and wants homeowners insurance, one of the things we've traditionally done is we've sent someone out to inspect the house, right? So we want to make sure the house is as described. We want to make sure the house isn't currently on fire, right, or has other condition issues. And that's not the greatest customer experience, right? Because a lot of time it kind of leaves you in the lurch on knowing whether we're actually going to insure you or not. You've got a human who's out doing measurements on your house and kind of walking around the place. Now we're using aerial imagery, right? And we can kind of do that process from a centralized location, right? So that gives you huge efficiency gains. But we're also, exploring machine vision to actually even take sort of that centralized human effort out. And that will allow us to give, instantaneous or near instantaneous decisions to customers, so that when they're done with that interaction, they'll know if they're insured for sure or not.
Yeah, no focus on the homeowner's part, because it irritates me that, several neighbors will go out and claim their roof is broken, and I end up paying the bill later on.
Yep. Well, we appreciate that.
Because the fraud detection is probably one area where I think the applications, once you have the data, would have to be, tremendous.
Yep.
I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are trying to run these models, trying to figure it out. What are some of the biggest challenges you have faced? Because I'm fairly certain, they are going through the same thing.
Yeah, one is I think more technical, right? So we've been using traditional statistical predictive models over time, even more recently, kind of traditional machine learning models, right? And in those types of models, you understand what's going in, you understand kind of what's coming out, right? And you can have a kind of a good sense, even in the machine learning space, what the model is doing. And there's sort of well-developed ways to measure things like accuracy and these types of things. Now with sort of the more sophisticated AI models, if you think of things like neural nets, it gets a little harder to tell kind of what's happening between input and output. And I'll tell you a story, and I will assure everyone that this was in the early phases of development that got nowhere near production. That's Allstate's corporate relations disclaimer. But when we were looking at the total loss vision models, what we found was that if the photo of the car was taken in a junkyard, that was highly predictive that it was going to be a total loss, right? And of course, it wasn't predictive at all, right? We were just taking photos too late in the game.
Yeah.
And it was really just seeing that it had already been totaled, right? And so that's something you had to kind of vary your process to make sure you're putting those checks in place to just make sure that the model the accuracy is kind of what you want it to be. And then I think because of those challenges, then I think there's this whole other kind of field of how do we think about fairness, right? Responsible AI. At Allstate, I think we've kind of taken what we've done from a model risk governance perspective and have really kind of broadened that to think about AI ethics, right? And how do we assure ourselves that we're choosing the right use cases, we have the right validation in place, we're doing the testing to make sure that there's no bias. But I think those are two challenges that, I don't know that anyone's solved just yet, but I think those are things that companies are going to have to grapple with, and I think the regulators will make sure we grapple with it.
Yeah, I remember listening to a podcast just about a month and a half ago between Bill Gates and Sam Altman, and they had asked some of these questions. So how does that neural network work? And both of them didn't have the answer. I was like, wow, this is not good. If these guys can't figure it out, it's going to be a nightmare for a lot of us.
Yep.
I spend my entire day trying to figure some of this stuff out, and you have professionals who do this for a living. I mean, I luckily don't do this for a living. So how do you even keep on top of this stuff? I mean, this is completely, impossible. For a lot of what I get is news and chatter, but for you it has to be technical and accurate.
Yep.
So how do you filter from the junk?
Yeah, it's crazy. Just the learning cycles are so much faster than when I was young. So I think there's a couple things we do. One is we have strategic partners that are frequently the developers of these types of tools and technologies, and so we keep in close contact with them to make sure we're understanding if they know something, even if it isn't perfect knowledge, but we make sure we know it. We have partnerships with universities, for example, to make sure we're staying on top of what may come next, right? Like large language models, I think, exploded onto the scene with ChatGPT last year, but it wasn't a brand new concept, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a decade-old concept, or at least in a practical sense. But that's something we could at least foresee coming a little bit. So we do that as well, and then we also dedicate time for people to stay current. It's not official continuing ed, but you've got to almost have an in-house continuing ed program just to make sure people are staying current, because if you take a year off from learning in this space, you're ancient.
No, that's good. All right, Eric, that's our time. Thank you so much for being here today.
You bet.
And sharing your thoughts. I'd like to hand over the proceedings over to my colleague, Isis. Now she's assembled an incredible panel, and they're going to go over and discuss how AI and data analytics are changing and shaping investor behavior.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. It wasn't that long ago that Microsoft unveiled ChatGPT, changing the way your kids do their homework, some of your colleagues do their work, and I guess most importantly for this audience, the way we invest and we trade markets. So we're here really to talk about how some of the smartest brains in the market are grappling to try to figure out how to best use the technology, where trust is, and can we trust it, and how can we actually make it something that's usable? So tell me a little bit about how you're using it at your company.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see everyone. I'm Lule Demmissie. I am the U.S. CEO of a fintech company called eToro, which is a trading platform for individual investors who come to our platform really to do trading on all sorts of instruments, from crypto to options to stocks, but also partake in a social ecosystem. It's a social trading platform. So we were at the genesis of the company, started as a force multiplier using the network effect, right? Because social is a network effect. So as AI started to take hold, it made sense that we were going to be one of the early adopters trying to experiment on how we would do this, right? We have a lot of data. We have about 32 million users on our platform globally, 100 countries that we do business in. And so we have a complexity of interesting behavior on investing that we leverage in a few ways. So one is how you search on our platform now. And we don't necessarily make these live in every country because of the regulatory sort of reality of different countries. So our search engine is optimized using AI. About 65 to 70% of every single question that comes from customers is actually served by our AI. We have portfolios that have been devised using either AI stocks or leveraging AI technology to be able to construct them. We also have what we call popular investors, which are people who get followed, because we have an instrument called Copy, where you can copy other people's strategies. So you can optimize how you copy, who you copy, how you mix, using some of the AI engine sort of powered stuff that we do. So it's been really interesting experimenting, and no doubt about it, we're going to continue to experiment because, as I said, the genesis of the company is really suited for this.
Kate.
Great. Hi, everybody. Kate El Hillow. I'm President and CIO at Russell Investments. And we've been using various forms like machine learning in our quant business and our research and development for many years. But probably about a year and a half ago, we started to broaden it out in terms of the rest of the investment team. And a big part of what we do, for those that don't know Russell, is that we select and hire managers from around the world, public and private, across all the different asset classes. And so we have lots of data that we've collected over the decades. But as we kind of looked and thought about how we were using it and how we actually had our process actually absorbing that data, it wasn't as dynamic, as it could be. And so a big piece of what we've been doing is, taking, a lot of that historical data that we've collected, but there's also just so much more enriched data that you can get on managers and different strategies now that we're starting to be able to pull into the various tools that we're creating. And the big theme that we have is really around looking for patterns and trends that, not only are the ones that we acknowledge and we've the determined, for lack of a better word, were the things that drive the good versus bad managers or the best managers, but actually started to look through and see, are there patterns or trends that we're not seeing because of the way that we've kind of structured our process over the years that actually helps us think through, are there certain managers that in certain macro environments or for certain types of outcomes that we're trying to achieve for our clients are better suited to kind of compare and combine together. So that's probably one of the most practical versions of what we've done. The other thing I would say is the private markets, for those that kind of live in that world and know how challenging it is to get data. In the public markets, there's so much information you can get, and so it's almost like overload, and it's just like trying to figure out how to best analyze it. On the private side, it's so manual getting that information in, and so a lot of what we've done is more on the Gen AI side, finding different techniques to pull in that information, whether it's through research reports, discussions we're having with managers, press releases, anything that you can kind of pull in terms of that unstructured data and get it into a place where you actually can, because you can never do with human power, get enough information, again, to look at trends that you're seeing across different types of managers, the companies that they're invested in. And so those are probably the two most recent things that we've been doing that are really core to kind of how we invest.
Artemiza?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Artemiza Woodgate. I am the CIO of Integrated Quantitative Investments. We are a quant shop, as the name says. We have been using AI. AI is actually, it's part of our DNA since we're quants from day zero. We're heavy users, and it's throughout the entire process, whether it's from the data collection, data analysis, model identification, model signal selection, signal weighting, all the way through to trading, risk optimization, and so forth. So to us, if I think about AI, I love the way you asked the question. I surround, ChatGPT came on board, a year and a half ago. Well, ChatGPT is like one of the small, changes in the marketplace and the evolution of what is a broad spectrum of AI. So machine learning's been around for a very long time. Big data and processing big data has been around for a very, very long time. So we're sort of, now adding one additional tool to our toolbox, aside from the machine learning models that are continuously improving. And within the Gen AI, I love what you said, Kate, around, using that to basically come to better insights. I like to think of it as doubling my team. I tell everybody, now you have a personal assistant, okay? So you are who you are, and you're so much more efficient because now there's you squared. So that's where, we're very heavy users of both machine learning and Gen AI throughout the entire process.
And I think trust has been an issue that a lot of people have been discussing. Can we trust it? Do we really need a human to verify it? And I think when we were preparing for this panel, I had a little conversation with you guys, and I said on my first job, I had to do the calculation of cocoa stockpiles on the exchange. And one of the things I had to do was basically, my boss used to go and look at the numbers and multiply and add everything in her calculator. And I was like, why don't we create like a spreadsheet for this ages ago? And she was like, can we trust this? And it took her a while to actually trust the spreadsheet. I wonder if we are in the same sort of space now with AI. Can we trust it? Do we need a human to verify? And I'm actually going to bring a question from the audience too. There is a QR code flashing sometimes that you can use. And I think the audience was asking, how do you see the prop models versus the open source? So I'm just going to open up to you guys, whoever wants to start.
Maybe I'll start just in terms of the proprietary models. I mean, because from a data perspective, just go into open source. It's helpful in terms of kind of getting the information in, and then it also gets shared out. And so I know, at least as we're thinking about it as a firm, it's trying to get that balance, right? It's about the trusting the data that we're using for sure, but it's more about the sharing of your IP out into the world that worries me more about kind of going open source. And so if you can mask it in some way because it's getting kind of aggregated with other information, maybe it's workable. But I do think that at least as I think about, ultimately we're running other people's money. And so the trust piece and making sure that we're rigorous in terms of the tools that we're building, that's always part of anything we do, but that's very natural. AI or Gen AI is just a different version of that. But I do think it's important to make sure that it is it's a newer technology, it's a newer way of thinking, it's a newer way of kind of approaching an investment problem. And so I do think having the humans, but the right humans that kind of have the skill set to actually think about how to use the tool, think about how to question the data, think about looking at the output and saying, okay, does this make sense or not? It's similar example I was thinking about when I first was working in finance, and we were doing risk budgets, risk budgets, and you had to build your own covariance matrix, and and it was like a pain to do, but you did it, and you actually felt like you had a lot of control over it, and you did little things in the back end that you probably shouldn't have done, but because it made the answer look better. And then when we shifted to machines to do it in our prop systems, I was always so worried that the analysts didn't understand how the math worked, but they figured it out over time. And so I do think there's this transition that we're going to need to go through where it's a new tool, it's a new technology. You need the people that really understand how to actually apply it, helping us develop it and integrate it into the organization and the ecosystem. But ultimately, I think it's going to be like any other tool where we're going to be able to build it and you're going to be able to trust it.
Artemiza.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, and maybe accentuate what Kate just talked about, having the skills to utilize the tool. Now, we used to hammer a nail. We used to put a nail in with a hammer. Now we all have the nail gun. Okay, so would someone who doesn't know how to build a house be able to build a house with a nail gun? That just because they have access to one? Well, no, you still need to know how to build a house. So using these tools, it's very important to understand what goes in and what comes out. How do you interpret it? I know nothing about the medical field. Okay, so if I ask ChatGPT questions about, am I sick and my knee's hurting? Well, do I have a doctor? Do I still need to go to a doctor or not? Do I just trust it? Maybe it gives me the right answer. Maybe it's not even a question of trusting the answer that comes out. It's just the ability to understand it and analyze it and interpret it and do something with it. And that's why I say, you take our people on our team and let's say you square them or you multiply them, but you still have that person and their know-how and their ability to ask the questions, interact with the tools that then you can leverage. You can't, create a doctor from, a quant necessarily, without them going through the proper training. That's at least my perspective. Yeah.
Fair enough. Lulu, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think that honestly, trust, although I'm going to say something really incendiary, I think it's the wrong word for the era we're living in. I think that what we need to figure out is, so there's a huge chasm between, I would say, 34 and under, 38-ish and under, and older when it comes to AI. So we do quarterly surveys of our customers, but as I said, we have 32 million users, so we also see what they do, right? And consistently, they rank technology and community higher than they do institutions and whatever else we do to increase trust for them. There's a chasm in which a generation has decided, I don't need you to be the go-between, just give me the tools to assess it. And because of that mental framework, what happens is they're better practiced at using these tools. And I actually think the way we're going to figure out what our new version of trust is back to what was just said, which is you become a practiced user. And when you become a practiced user, you know where the dark corners are. You know how to ascertain certain things better. So I do think that to some extent, it's almost like this is a moment where we should be taught by the young. I think they have a different perspective. 98% of my staff is people who are 34 and under. So I've already been inducted into that space, whether I like it or not. And I do think that there is a mental framework that they bring forth that is incredibly useful in helping us understand how to approach the age of AI.
And that sort of brings me to my next question. I think, how will the uses of AI be different if you are an institutional investor or a retail investor? And I think, Lule, you have like a great perspective on that.
Yeah, I think part of it is structural, right? So, Warren Buffett just came out, I think, yesterday or the day before, and he was talking about, I don't know what to do with all this cash, excess cash as an asset manager, as I have this mandate. I can't easily find, he didn't quite say it that way, but that's what he was saying. I can't easily find places that I could deploy capital in, right? Individual investors don't have a mandate of an institutional burden. They can look at a trend and see that mega caps are winning. They don't have something holding them back to be like, and so for them, ultimately, they look at the data and they look at, they're not, because platforms like eToro have empowered people to have access to these markets now, right? Ultimately, they can go and express those ideas on their own. So what you see on our platform is individuals taking advantage of what's happening now to take profit off the table. About 40% of them are selling in this environment. Then they go off and go deeper in the top names, right? The top mega names when they get a little cheaper. They partake in crypto. They don't have an institutional mandate holding them back. It is literally what they learn from the community, right? Because again, there is community within the ecosystem of eToro and community outside, their own research. 82% of them say they actually they would be happy to rely on AI-empowered asset management tools or research. They already use them. 57% of them say they use them already. So they've already leapt into the future. I'm not saying that the future is all candy and sweetness, right? But I am saying that I think all innovation requires a certain level of leap in order to understand it in its ecosystem. And then we figure out what's the new normal of creating, managing the moral hazards and the rules of engagement around it.
How does it work for you, Kate?
Yeah, I think you said like the, I don't know, is it the institutional anchor or whatever it is. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're managing somebody else's money, there probably is a different bar that you feel like you need to clear in order to put $1 of capital to work. And so I do think that runs the risk of not taking as much risk, right? And not kind of being as innovative or exploratory in how some of these tools can be used. That said, if you look back, most investment processes are about kind of creating frameworks and models to kind of take in data and try to think about it in the environment they're operating in. And this is just an evolution of a way to do that. And so while I think institutional investors are going to be more cautious to just shift over or turn on an AI model to make investment decisions on how to run somebody's pension assets or somebody's endowment assets, I do think that there is an excitement from, I wouldn't just say the 30 and under. It's very interesting. I actually think it's the senior people, at least as I've experienced and in just talking in the industry, senior people and the junior people that are really trying to understand how to apply this. And I do think that there's a great partnership, at least that I think in my organization, where we're creating sandboxes that are, let's just call it safe for people to try out new things, bring out new ideas. And it's giving them the chance to innovate and think about data in a different way than maybe the senior team members might think about it, but do it in a way that allows you to actually have some rigorous discussion around it and testing around it before you actually use it to actually invest somebody else's money.
Yeah. Artemiza, I think I would love to weigh on that, but also in one of the audience's questions, how do you separate hype from reality?
Right. Well, that's a difficult question to answer, hype versus reality. And, for us, machine learning has been part of who we are, but AI is much broader than that. It's about facial recognition, it's about robotics, it's about so much more. And, generative AI is one tool there. Next, machine learning and things are related and so on and so forth. So I think there's definitely a reality that has been around for a very long time. I don't see it as just hype. And it's amazing how the new tools have been embraced by a much broader group, which hopefully will lead to acceptance, which hopefully will lead to maybe even institutional investors, which are still humans, and have to make a decision whether or not to trust a quant manager. If you show them a machine learning model, then they say, oh yeah, we get it. ChatGPT told us all what it's about, But at the end of the day, yeah, I think there's probably quite a bit of reality, I think, in this. There is hype and excitement around any new technology. But it'll take a while between when that hype will be reflected in seeing a robot walking down the street and shaking your hand and, greeting you, or doing the next thing that people want to see that's visible in their faces.
But the other thing that you also talked about was productivity, right? How
Yeah.
now everyone has an assistant, and we know that, the U.S. and lots of places in the world are really facing a productivity crisis. Talk about how you use AI to increase your productivity.
Right. Well, we have, free mandate, I guess, on my team, figure it out. Do as you wish. But, the results, obviously, there's a certain research process that has to be adhered to. And I love there's also another question from the audience I see about best practices for refining the AI model versus prior manually driven analysis. There are best practices that need to be in place, whether it's investing other people's money, best practices for research so you don't just data mine and believe spurious correlations, best practices for how to utilize these tools so you don't just randomly start nailing everything to the wall. So all of these need to be adhered to, but beyond that, everybody is free to go ahead and do their research and learn. And it's in that learning part that is really where the AI steps in. The prior tools we had, let's say AI is about, and machine learning is about a model that learns on its own from the data. The prior manual-driven analysis, as the audience member asks, is about where the human says, I believe this is the structure. You go and you start cut your cookie left, up and down and up and down. So there's a human element versus a machine learning. The machine learns the model and machine has that feedback loop. So it's useful to understand the machine learning and bring that in, but you need the human to validate that. You need the human to go ahead and interact with it and bring the results and follow the process so you don't, chase unicorns.
Any thoughts on that? Go ahead.
So for us, productivity is, I think that's very true. That productivity comes in a few categories. So one is where it improves scalable productivity. So as I said, 65% of our servicing of our customers now actually is taken care of through the bot, right? Where somebody will either prompt or monitor the bot, but that is happening. Our marketing team, over 60+% of work we do out of our marketing work is augmented by some sort of an AI machine tool somebody uses. So those are sort of like the scale work productivity. Then there's the individual work productivity, right? So what took us, 7 different people and several stops and cookie maker processes, now one person can produce an ad in 2 seconds, and that's that, right? So we've shrunk time when it comes to individuals that are producing without having as many handoffs. In fact, we have our options analyst out there today, right? So he publishes in the morning, he does his shows in the afternoon. He is essentially a self-contained pod with machinery around him and people, yes, around him as well. So I think there's individualized productivity that has come out of this, but there's also scalable productivity that has come out of it. And I think we are just scratching the surface on both.
Kate.
Yeah, I think the only thing I might, add, I think is a little bit of what we were just saying, that the prior technology was that process automation and, taking something that you kind of had created and doing it more efficiently, and RPA and all that type of stuff. I think about about a year ago when we got basically a group of leaders together to start thinking about AI, Gen AI projects. We did reach out to everybody at the firm and say, give us some ideas on things that could have a lot of impact that you think would be, relevant to applying this type of technology. And 70% of what came back was more RPA, more process automation type of stuff. And so I do think, to make the point on AI, what needs to be different is you need to think about transforming the process when you think about how to use some of this data. And that's where you actually get, I think, a scale and an impact in terms of productivity that's very different than at least the investing industry, I think, has seen. We've done a lot of process automation over the decades, and certain quant teams have improved their investment strategy. But really, to change our business model, you need to think about this as transformative. And so you need to start out maybe early stages doing the stuff that we know how to do. And so we do manager meetings, we get in data, let's take that in and have a machine try to help us do it better. But what I'm really excited about in terms of productivity is when we actually get enough people within the organization that understand now how to apply these type of technologies to actually do something different and something better. And that's the piece where I think the real productivity and margin differences and the real change in our industry is going to happen.
And do you think, as one of the audience members is asking, have you been able to measure, data validation? how has that happened for you?
Oh, well, I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples. Right? So I have some fun ones. So I had a fixed income portfolio manager left our R&D team, the one that was doing machine learning. Within 6 months, she had automated herself out of 80% of her job. I was so excited. I can't tell you, I moved her into a much different role, and a different, more senior role, and one that was much more creative and innovative, trying to think through different ways to apply this to the investment process. But there is that another great example. We had a portfolio manager in London, multi-asset, complicated stuff, having to pull stuff from so many different places, because the asset classes, different systems. We had an intern come in, and within 2 cycles of quarterly reporting, took something that took 9 days down to basically 3 hours. I mean, the portfolio manager was, shocked and amazed at the same time, and just had to do a quick review. You still needed the review, but the amount of things that we can actually start to do once you unleash people and give them kind of the open forum to do it, I think is going to be really.
And with every new technology, AI is obviously attracting the attention of regulators. Is there anything that you're concerned about as regulators start looking closely into AI, and especially for this audience, the use of AI in markets and investing?
My biggest worry is back to the sort of the mental framework part of it. So I think there are 2 fundamental things that I think regulation, by definition, is in the DNA of, right? So one is, whether it's policymakers or regulators, it's this protectionist attitude, right? So we must protect first. And sometimes when you do that, what you end up doing is make the cost of entry much more expensive for innovators to come in, because now they have to have a compliance department that's larger than their dev department, right? And that, I don't think, is the right answer. I do think that it is guardrail oriented that we need to have rules around, and not specific rules that seem prohibitive. I'll give you an example. I love the White House guidelines for AI that they published about a few months ago, at least 6 months ago, I think. The SEC one, I think, is a little bit more problematical, because it is very prescriptive in its an attempt to try to create the world. We don't know what this world, this brave new world, is going to be like. So in some ways, the regulation has to be guardrail oriented to allow for experimentation, and then we course correct as we go along, whether it's with rules or the coding that we do, right? And so that's my worry, is that both policymakers and regulators may not have the mental framework to ensure that we end up actually making innovation slower in America, which would be a big problem from a sort of advancing innovation in America.
Artemiza?
Yeah, I actually think that, at least on the institutional side, having been users of machine learning and big data for a long time, the regulators actually have been actually pretty on top, and have learned how to deal with, protecting individuals' personal information, and making sure that you don't web scrape, and what you web scrape, and how all those rules are set up to protect the individuals and the customers, and so forth, and associated understanding the risks associated with investing or utilizing certain techniques. I hope that they will apply the same mindset to understand what is there to protect without inhibiting, as you said, while allowing people to innovate, because otherwise it would be a real shame. And given how widely adopted this is, the new technology, and how excited people are about it, I think there's a lot that can come out of it. But we do need to protect the individuals. And I shouldn't be able to find a data set or somehow scrape it and put it together that tells me exactly where you were yesterday at 2 o'clock and what you bought, right? So there is, I think we need that fine line, and we need the protection in there within the right dose.
And that's the last question from the audience too, Kate. Maybe you can help us with that one. What risks do you see associated with AI, considering that it learns much faster than humans, and that pace is just likely to keep accelerating?
Yeah, this is where I'll say 2 things. One, I've always in my career surrounded myself with people that understand the technology and all the stuff better than I do, and I think that that's going to be yet more important. We need to make sure we have the right people in the room to really understand these risks and how to control it. That said, I do think that this is something that is very solvable, and so whether it is through some version of regulation, but I would think that it's a moment from an industry perspective, or for us to really own, thinking through how we kind of use this information, how you use this data. There's going to be bad actors. Unfortunately, that's the world that we live in, and you need to kind of put the structures and the ways to detect that. cyber risks that are associated with AI starts to get very concerning. You get data sets that are put out there that tell you a certain answer that make you invest in a certain way that lose you a whole lot of money. And there's been people there that are going to do that because they're going to be on the other side of the trade. So there definitely needs to be, with it's strong regulation, but also I think strong industry-wide participation and really thinking through how do you control this data and this information and how it's being used when it's actually getting put into the market. When you have it in the research arena, I feel a bit more comfortable that you can control it before it actually gets into the trading world and where it can actually do some real economic damage for individuals or corporations. But I do think that this is a moment where we need to take some ownership over this and try to figure out how to control it and police it. The one thing we haven't talked about, though, that I feel like we should mention is the cost of doing AI is quite prohibitive. One of the reasons we reached out to the firm to ask for ideas is we needed to prioritize what were like the 3 to 5 projects that we were going to work on in 2023 that we thought would have a lot of impact, because when you start taking this type of data and the computing power that's required for it, it gets extraordinarily expensive. So I didn't want to end the discussion without us just mentioning that's going to be limiting as much more than the regulations are. I think. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the risks and the costs, Lule.
So I would just double down on what she said, but I also think that what's probably going to happen is the megas will spend the money on the computational and the rest of us will consume the data and augment it. So I do think there will be sort of like a barnacle rock sort of relationship eventually where smaller innovators will start benefiting from the mass amount of data sort of work that the larger institutions have done. But if you're trying to be part of the circle of folks that are being, that are actually doing the computational power, it is incredibly expensive.
Artemiza?
Well, we're cloud-based, and I believe that there's a tremendous amount of work that has been done on the computational side to facilitate smaller players to become the barnacles. But there's a tremendous amount of data as well, that requires processing. So it is a bit of a, there's truth to both sides. It is more expensive. It's actually, quite expensive also in terms of human training to know how to employ the models and utilize them. But on the other hand, you also have access to a lot more candy, a lot more sugar to fuel the machine, so you're running high all the time, sugar high. So it's I think it's going to be, stepwise. You have a change in the human element and then change in the computational power and augmenting each other. We see tremendous evolution right now.
And how long is it going to take for us to really be where you guys think we should be in the market?
I still want my nanny, my robo nanny. That's a problem to be solved for any working mom. So I don't know when it's going to arrive.
I think it is going to be super fast, and I think our problems are going to be whether us in this room are more native users of it than it is about anything else.
Kate?
I think it's going to be quicker than we think, but I think it is going to take this next generation of people coming into the workforce, including people that are there right now and they're in their 20s, to get empowered and to get in order for this to really take off. And so, but I think it's going to happen quicker than we think, but we need to make sure we're empowering kind of that next gen of people that can really help us think through how to apply it to actually have it happen quick.
I'm very excited to see what you guys come up with, and really thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
And thank you, everybody, for being here. I think next we have a spotlight from our sponsor, Invesco. Thank you.
I'm Michelle Lynn, Global Head of Data Science and Insight for the Bloomberg Media Organization, and I'm joined by Paul Schroeder, QQQ Equity Product Strategist for Invesco's QQQ Sponsor Spotlight, Rethinking Innovation. Welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Should we jump right in?
Sure.
All right. So just as a reminder, can you tell us what QQQ is?
Sure. So QQQ is a passive index-based ETF that seeks to track the NASDAQ 100 index. Now, the NASDAQ 100 index is comprised of the 100 largest non-financial companies listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. So where we've seen Qs really fall is within the large cap growth bucket. And because of the great work that NASDAQ has done, attracting technologically focused and innovative companies to list on their exchange. We've seen Qs do rather well throughout the years.
So the appetite to invest in innovation has grown. How has that benefited QQQ?
Sure. So if we think of the way that technology has changed, throughout the years, and some of the major technologies that really influence the way that we live our day-to-day lives and have the potential to change the way we live and work in the future, many of the Qs companies have been at the center or adjacent to those technologies. If we think back to things like the rise of the internet, the dawn of social media, the pivot to people using smartphones, I should say, and obviously more recently the focus on AI, many Qs companies have played a significant role in bringing those technologies to market. And overall, why is that? Is that we see Qs companies really have a focus and an ability to adapt and innovate. Now, it's important to keep in mind and focus on how do you really quantify innovation. And we really quantify innovation in two different ways. First, we look at research and development spending. And what we've seen is that your average Qs company is outspending your average S&P 500 company by about 2 to 1 within research and development. If you take out those NASDAQ 100 companies from the S&P 500, that multiple increases to about 15 to 1. As I mentioned, patent activity is the second thing we really look for. And for example, last year we saw about 40% of all natural language processing patents filed across the globe by a NASDAQ 100 or Qs company. So what we're seeing is that these Qs companies obviously have a high propensity to innovate throughout the years, and we believe that has led and contributed to the fundamental growth that these companies have seen throughout the years, and obviously the strong performance. The Qs are coming off their best calendar year performance, where in 2023 the fund was up by about 55%, and since inception, the fund is up cumulatively and outperforming the S&P 500 cumulatively by about 350%, or about 2% annualized. So, overall, we feel that the strong fundamental growth has really contributed overall. And to more directly answer your question, how has the Qs benefited? We've obviously seen more investors use the Qs within their portfolios, and the AUM has grown within the fund. It's represents about 26% of all large cap growth ETF assets in the world.
So who is driving the growth?
Yeah, so we see a lot of different users really driving the growth. The assets now within the fund are at about $250 billion, and it's also the second most traded ETF in the world. So as I mentioned before, individual investors have really started to use it, financial professionals for their clients' portfolios as a growth engine of their portfolio. And due to the liquidity, we've also seen more sophisticated and institutionals use it to access the NASDAQ 100 over shorter periods of time.
So, as one of the oldest ETFs, QQQ is really a leader in the democratization that you're referring to.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, Qs have been around a long time. They turned 25 here in 2 weeks on March 10th, which we're very excited about. The Qs have really been around to see the individual investor rise to prominence. If we think back 25 years plus, how do you gain exposure to the NASDAQ 100? You call your broker, you pay a large commission to place trades in 100 different names, or you buy a mutual fund that executes at the close. Now, any of us can pull out our phone, download an app, place a trade for as little as 1 share and have it execute intraday. So really, we've seen the Qs provide a liquid, cost-effective, and tax-efficient way for any type of investor to access the NASDAQ 100, a basket of companies that have really changed the way we lived.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for sharing your insights on rethinking innovation as part of the Invesco QQQ Sponsor Spotlight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul and Michelle. Paul, keep up the good work. I need a few more of those 2023 returns, and I'll be happy with that. So our final conversation today is with someone who leads the e-commerce for an industry giant, and she's here to share her insights into the inner workings of a large data-driven business. So Cheng is the Vice President and Global Head of Digital Commerce at Mondelēz. My household spends a lot of money on Oreos, and I'm sure my son's going to be very happy about it that I was talking to her today. So to start off with, please tell us about your role at the company, your background, and what you're currently responsible for.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, very excited to be here, and thank you for having me, Bloomberg. My role is, as mentioned, I lead global e-commerce. At Mondelēz, yes, we are the Oreo maker and also Ritz Cracker and Cadbury chocolate, a lot of amazing, iconic brands around the world. So in my current role, I lead e-commerce at a global scale, but maybe I can share a little bit about my background. I spent over 20 years in digital marketing and e-commerce in various CPG companies, including like Hershey, Campbell Soup, a lot of food companies, right? But also Philips North America as well. And in my roles, I think I've witnessed and also actively contributed to the remarkable evolution of digital media and the e-commerce in business. But at the core of that evolution, it is really the data. The data, the ever-growing significance of data that drive decisions in the business world. So in my current role as I lead the e-commerce business, I am also deeply involved in integrating data analytics in every aspect of e-commerce business. So happy to be here again, to share some perspective how we use data in our CPG world, the consumer goods world. Yeah.
That's great. So you're back in Hershey's also. So collectively, it's responsible for a lot of my weight gain. So how are things different in the U.S. versus some other parts of the world when it comes to these businesses?
For e-commerce specifically.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I think to share that maybe a little bit first, the different models of e-commerce, it's actually very vastly different as well. For example, when we talk about e-commerce, we always think about Amazon, right? You order something, get shipped to your home in one-day delivery, but it's a home shipment. It needed to be shelf life stable, shipping friendly. So that is one fulfillment model, home shipment. Then in the food space, it became much more complicated because it's perishable. How can you ship like ice cream? Maybe, yeah. The one thing they delivered in the last couple of years is called last mile delivery. So you order something, get it in 15 minutes. So that is another model that's delivered to your home. Or you schedule appointment with get a grocery delivered to your home via Instacart in US, for example, right? But the most common one, which actually invented in Europe, not US, is called click and collect. You order online, pick up in the store, which is the majority of e-commerce business. So answer to your question, in US now, the click and collect is a very mature model now. If you go to Walmart, you go to Target, you do have the click and collect choice. You still need to pick up yourself, but you can order and someone pack it for you. Then the Amazon one, then the Instacart one I mentioned. But you go to Europe or you go to Australia, the whole model is pretty much click and collect because those markets dominated by, we call it omni-channel customer or retailer. Think about I don't know if anyone come from Australia, like the two dominant retailers over there is Woolworths and Coles. So 99% of the business is done in a click and collect model, right?
Wow.
Yeah. I personally, I grew up in China, so I spent the last more than 20 years in US now. China is very dynamic e-com market, right? And some of this e-commerce model is actually now started to invent it in China, like social commerce, TikTok in China. It's a live streaming, the the social commerce is loud and live over there. You know, a couple years ago, we say it's Alibaba's Tmall or JD.com. Those are dominant 80% business happening in those two platforms. They are losing traffic to platform like TikTok, which is Douyin in Chinese, right? Or the live streaming. So it's vastly different. And if you go to India, so it's also another different model. It's a lot of last mile delivery. If you go to Latin America, Brazil, it's also last mile, but also digitizing the traditional trades through different platforms. So it's a very dynamic space, and that's what gets me very excited to work on this space. You got to learn everything, something new every day, basically.
It's truly fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you have any thesis of why such a big disparity between these regions? Anything you can give us an insight on?
Yeah, I think three things. One is I mentioned is a retailer dynamics are very different. In France or UK, you have those very multi-channel, omni-channel retailers who dominate space. So that's why the click and collect is so live over there. And the shopper behavior is another thing. Right? Shopper behavior is the consumers who are using, like Chinese consumer, for example, they are very into e-commerce buying. So e-commerce penetration in China is the highest around the world. That's another thing. But so shopper is another area. So retailer is one, and then technology or infrastructure maturity. Some of the markets have more established like fulfillment model to enable the e-commerce. So those are kind of the three factors: retailers' readiness, shopper behavior, as well as infrastructure or technology. Yeah.
Well, let's jump to data, because that's an area where we've seen so much of change over the last several years.
Yeah.
How do how's data being used in the world of CPG to drive business decisions?
Yeah, for sure. I think, first of all, data in CPG companies play a pivotal role in almost every aspect of business. But maybe I can share 4 key areas how CPGs use data. The first one is marketing, right? So we do read a lot of tons of data about our shoppers, because we need to understand the shopper mission, the purchase pattern, and also the shopper behavior, right? So this way those insights feed into tailored marketing campaigns or optimize the pricing strategy and also operation as well. So that's marketing. The other area related is new product development, right? So because as CPG company, we need to understand our consumer, what they want. So this market trend and consumer needs, ever evolving consumer demand is so important for us to know, and we read a lot of data for that. And because I lead e-commerce, part of my team's job is also managing the Amazon business. My team spent a lot of time in analyzing the Amazon search data, for example, because it's such a rich perspective. You use those data, understand what people are looking for on Amazon.com, and what are some of the new trends people are actually expecting or looking for products like health and wellness, for example, on Amazon, to understand the new trends of snacking. And all these data help us to have a grasp idea about how the consumer view, so we can share with our R&D team for innovation, right? And the third space I would say is operation. So data play a very extensive role in supply chain optimization. So we read sales data, weather patterns, and logistic information. All this data helps us to manage inventory much more efficiently, right? And this data also helps us to minimize whether it's overstock or out of stock situation. So we always keep the level of the inventory at the optimal level to meet the shopper needs. And lastly, in my own world, the e-commerce, we use a lot of data to provide a more pleasant shopping experience, from the personalized website content all the way to recommended products. So all this helping to provide a more seamless shopping journey, basically. So those are kind of the 4 areas I can share. Apparently, every other areas of retail execution use a lot of data, and technology for sure, right? So, but I'll just.
You know, when we were talking, you had given me a case study to read, some homework to do. And I was so fascinated by that case study that Mondelēz did with the help of Walmart. I had to listen to it twice just to get the gist of it, and I never understood I never thought that the cookie business or the cracker business is going to be so complicated. I would love for you to tell that story to everybody as to how you have used data to get more insights, with Walmart.
Absolutely. So at Mondelēz, as Anurag mentioned, we use a lot of data to get a better understanding our brands, for example. So the case study Anurag referenced is about Ritz crackers. Hopefully you have some of that at home as well. So one thing is Walmart as a biggest retailer in the world, still, right? Maybe after Amazon these days. But I think they actually last year launched this very powerful tool called Luminate. We are actually now asked to move away from the retail link to Luminate as well. So our Mondelēz customer team worked with the Walmart Luminate data team. They tried to find out the Walmart shoppers, who are buying Ritz crackers. Try to get a better understanding, first why they buy them, buy Ritz crackers, and how they consume them, and what type of pack types, all this, you have a family size, you have single serve, you have all these pack types. So why do they choose that certain pack types? So with the Walmart Luminate data, we get a very good understanding. Basically, people choose different pack types in the store, which, by the way, is a very competitive category for cracker, and competing the store's shelf space is very, it's a battle basically, because Walmart try to keep as few as possible, and we try to have that shelf space to tell our brand story, right? So we basically use the data to quantify why we need all these different pack types in the Walmart store and online, right? Because they all serve a very different consumer needs, right? So we also learned, consumer using Ritz crackers not just for the snacking piece. They also use for at-home entertainment especially during holiday, right? And some of these very neat insights we uncovered, like people actually love crushing Ritz crackers, right? Mix it with like the butter, the cheese, so they can create this crunchy topping when they make casserole. So these are all very insightful needs and can spark a lot of Ritz cracker related recipes. So we had a lot of fun with that for sure.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I had to listen twice. I'm like, wow, I got to go back and look at it. So now moving from data to Gen AI, how are you using it in the company, and where do you think it's going to go at the projects you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, for CPG companies, Gen AI, we are just starting testing the water a little bit, I say. But however, Mondelēz definitely we are at the forefront of that innovation. Actually, 2 weeks ago at the CAGNY event in Florida, our CEO Dirk and the CFO Luca shared 2 slides, which is, a big deal for us, right? About generative AI, how we at Mondelēz use generative AI for marketing, right? So we are certainly find it's a very promising space to be in. So for us, personally, I think, and also for Mondelēz in general, there's 2 roles we believe generative AI can help us to unlock some new opportunity. The first one is really revolutionize the consumer experience, right? Now think about it, imagine the AI system can generate, your personalized product recommendation, marketing copy, but also potentially, the packaging, packaging design, which is really based on your each individual's preference or your taste, right? So that mass customization is going to be really revolutionize the experience because it can help us to drive more engaged consumer or shopper, but also enhance brand loyalty as well, right? But of course, at this stage of AI, we still need a human intervention, I believe, to vet the AI outputs, you know. So that is one area we see. But the other space, and we actually have a case study I can share as well, is about content. So generative AI is going to create high quality, and we already see that, high quality, highly engaging content as well, right? From the, I think the product description, product copies, the basic ones, but all the way to advertising copy, right? So that is going to help us to really cut down the cost, the one thing, but also, you know, helps us keep the consistency and the relevancy of the brand messaging as well. Yeah. One case study I want to share with all of you is we launched a Gen AI campaign just at the end of last year. I wouldn't call it a Gen AI campaign. It's user Gen AI technology. It's a Cadbury campaign, you know, Cadbury chocolate campaign. It's called My Birthday Song. So the idea about the campaign is really we wanted to personalize your birthday celebration. So instead of using this traditional happy birthday song, right, we encourage the friends and families who want to celebrate their loved ones for the birthday celebration, go create your personalized birthday song by sharing a few that person's traits or shared memories with family and friends. Then utilize the generative AI tool to create AI-generated lyrics, music, and vocals for your personalized birthday song. So that is a cool idea. It's really celebrate the uniqueness of you, the being the birthday person, and with some really fun feature. But it's also actually cost effective as well, you put it that way, and speaks to the brand personality, you know, because Cadbury is all about big moments of generosity to celebration as well, you know. So that's a good example. But in a nutshell, yeah, we are very excited about this space, and we are definitely leaning in. Yeah.
No, it's amazing. I mean, I'm just looking forward to more and more fun things coming from the chocolate world. Now,
yeah.
When you look at a lot of people who work with you, and that's the question we asked our expert at Allstate also. This is an area where the skill set is not even, you know, we don't know how things are changing at such a fast pace. How do you keep up with it, and how do you make sure your staff has it?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I think that's kind of my personal philosophy, but we also advocate in the company as well, in the world, you know, we are in, and in the future generation is that being a lifelong learner is a mandatory thing, basically, right? It's a you know, it's just that's the way it needs to be in the world you are living in, you know. So have that learning mindset is very important. At Mondelēz, I think the company we do a good job in terms of upskilling our workforce, you know. So for example, my team, you know, I run e-commerce business for the company, but not everybody knows how e-commerce works. People are very good selling, you know, selling snacks to the physical store, but not everyone has a knowledge about operating e-com business. So for example, we actually launched a enterprise-wide upskilling initiative to teach everybody the basics of e-commerce 101. And we keep refreshing the course as well. In the meantime, in order to make this course more accessible to everybody, we have all different formats of those upskilling initiatives. For example, we have podcasts, we have 3 minutes video, we have, you know, and webinars. So that's a major initiative we do at Mondelēz to upskill our employees, you know, in this new world where there's e-commerce. Everybody needs to know how to run the e-com business, right? Because it's not just the e-com team's role. Supply chain needs to know how to put the goods in the e-commerce shelf as well, right? But also, you know, generative AI, same thing. We have massive upskilling initiative about Gen AI, and we have, thankfully, there's a lot of free course also we can export. And we partner with partners like Accenture as about our partner to bring those knowledge in, that's expertise in as well to the organization to share with others. But net, I think being a lifelong learner is mandatory in the world we're living in. Yeah.
We're almost running out of time. Let me just ask one last question. You know, you mentioned a lot about the different countries and the e-commerce. Why hasn't anybody figured out grocery yet? I'm just always curious about it.
Yeah.
Any insight on that?
Yeah. I think it's definitely evolving. As a matter of fact, I joined Mondelēz during the peak of pandemic, July 2020. And that is because I saw the opportunity. This is a time if, you know, maybe this is going to revolutionize the grocery business. E-commerce grocery was doubled, more than doubled, tripled at least for Mondelēz in some of the countries in, you know, in those years. I think it's a habit forming. Yeah, so click and collect is one of these fulfillment model, deliver, and the last mile delivery is another fulfillment. Those are kind of, is continue to revolutionize the grocery e-commerce space, you know. Still very small percentage, but it's getting bigger and bigger every year. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I think we all learned something new today. Thanks so much, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you. You know, that does it for the content portion of our event. I want to thank our speakers as well as all of you for being such a captive audience. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Invesco QQQ. If you like more information from them, please visit the resources tab on the event website. To watch any part of this event, you can return to BloombergLive.com, the Future Investor 2024 to view on demand. Now, please join us as we continue the Future Investor series in San Francisco on May 7th and Atlanta in June. For more details and registered, please visit BloombergLive.com. And most of all, thank you for being such an engaged audience. For those here in the room, please join us now for cocktails and networking. And for everybody else, you know, go buy some Oreos. Thank you.